All right, thank you so much for joining me in this particular lecture regarding paper 1. And today we are going to talk about intercultural communication. So intercultural and cross communication is the important topic to go through. As you know that we are going through from communication parts, we have already understood number of concepts regarding process types and other things, like what are parties involved, and most importantly the different types of communication, whether these relates to specific areas, like we have already understood regarding verbal communication and non-verbal communication, in which we have studied regarding the body language, para language, space language, and these kind of things. And today and tomorrow, these 2 days have specifically been assigned for a specific topic. This is cross culture communication or intercultural communication. So we shall be trying our best to complete both the topics by today, so that we can do something else for tomorrow. So we shall be doing both of the topics in today's video lecture, and if this is not completed, maybe we are taking the next lecture as well, because we have already taken first lecture at before this lecture, and after this lecture immediately again one lecture shall be taken. If this is not for paper 1, that shall certainly be for paper 2. So I hope you would have got the idea of what we are going to do in this specific lecture. This is going to be regarding cross and intercultural communication. So by the name, you can get to know that that is a very easy concept to go through, very easy to understand. You people are sane enough that by merely 1 or 2 readings, you can understand what is written in all this, all these things. Okay, because these are just theoretical parts. None kind of a concept is there to be studied or understood. So that's very easy to go through. There are some mere lines which usually even a layman can understand who do not have any prior knowledge or basic post graduation level education base. So just going to share you the screen. Before sharing, as usual, I have to ask you, I need just 4 or 5 confirmations if my voice is completely audible and I am seeable to you. Can I start my lecture right now? Can I get your permission to start my lecture? Can I start it? I just need some confirmation so that I started. All right, thank you so much. I've got the confirmation now. Just going to share my screen. And before sharing, I must tell you that if there is any kind of a problem you are facing, then as usual, you can leave. The recording shall be there. And most importantly, if this lecture is not over in this specific time frame, then maybe we are taking the next lecture as well. So these were 2 most important announcements in case you face any kind of a trouble or issue, and do not pose any trouble from your cell phones to my side as well. Just going to share the screen and make you all see what we have prepared for you in this specific lecture. So this is going to be related to interculture and group communication. Interculture is also referred to as, in context of our communication subject, the cross communication. So interculture, where you can understand this is very easily, where number of cultures are involved. Okay, where there are more than 2 cultures involved. In case of communication between 2 parties, then that kind of communication shall be considered to be the intercultural communication. And group communication, when the sender is one but the receiver are large in number, that can be considered to be the group communication. Or it can also be between group to group, like there is group 1, there is group 2, and they are talking to each other or they are discussing with each other. That shall also be considered to be the group communication, and further its aspect we shall be seeing in upcoming slides. So now I think you would have got the complete idea. So what this topic actually relates to, this is just an extension of types of communication. Okay, this is just an extension of that, and I don't know why that has been extended this much, this specific book or this specific subject is very easy to go through, but I must tell you, even if this seems to be very easy, you people shall not be able to make more than 4 questions right at any cost, because they shall pose a question in a way, one question we are never able to understand from which portion they have asked. By merely looking through all these things and going through these topics seems to be very easy, that we shall be easily covering all the aspects, but I must tell you, along with that, practice other topics as well, because whatever the time you save from these kind of specific subjects, you should devote it to teaching, then a research aptitude and some mathematics as well. Okay, so now just going to go to the next slide. This is related to cross cultural communication. Okay, I have already given you some description regarding when there are two parties involved in the communication which are having different cultural backgrounds. Okay, so that kind of communication shall be considered to be cross cultural communication. So in this communication, that refers to the communication between people who have differences in any of the following styles of working. That can be your nationality, ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, or anything. That kind of communication shall be considered to be inter or cross-cultural communication. So in this, what happens? Cross-cultural communication also refers to the attempt that are made to exchange, negotiate, mediate cultural differences. Where there are cultural differences and you try to exchange, negotiate and mediate by any mean, like by means of your language, by means of gestures, by means of body language, you try to communicate, exchange, negotiate your cultural differences. So that kind of system of communication shall be considered to be the cross cultural communication. Okay, it is how people belonging to different cultures communicate with each other. How you can, what system of communication can you use? Okay, you can use anything like your language, if this is the similar language but the cultural differences are there. You can use your gestures, you can use your body language, you can experience that. In India or in all over India, there are number of different cultural prevalent nowadays. Okay, so and there are number of different languages which we can never understand, and we can never learn complete languages. So there is the complete possibility of cross culturalism in India all over. So if we wish to communicate with them, first maybe we have to learn their language, or there are other ways as well. Okay, like with gestures or body language or by any other means other than language, they can understand our language. So in this way, when there are involved more than two culturals, so that kind of a communication is considered to be cross cultural communication. So it has been influenced by a variety of academic discipline. I just told you that these are merely reading part of things and theoretical, none kind of a conceptual thing is there. So all these lines just refers to the different features and characteristics regarding cross-cultural communication. So cross-cultural communication creates a feeling of trust and enables cooperation. So the focus is on providing the right response rather than providing the right message. Okay. So in case of cross cultural communication, the last point you have to remember in your mind that this always focus on providing the right response, because if there are two parties involved, party A, party B, and they both represents to the different cultures, and if A is talking to B, then the possibility or the focus should always be on a right response. Okay, so this is ultimately the responsibility of a receiver in case of a cross cultural communication, that he should provide the right response. Only then there can be the effective and cordial kind of a communication possible. So that was regarding cross cultural communication. Okay, So there are some relevant forms and types of intercultural or cross-cultural communication which we have to understand from these things. So the first one is a direct communication. Okay, this is the direct communication. So this is when a sender directly meets the receiver without any kind of mediation or mediator. With the direct communication, the information is addressed to the sender directly by the recipient and can be done either verbally or in writing. When two parties are together, okay, in communication, that kind of a communication shall be considered to be the direct communication. There is a sender, there is a receiver, and after receiver has received the message, he has to reply back. He has to give a right reply and right information, and at that time the receiver plays the role of the sender and the sender plays the role of the receiver. Okay, so the kind of communication when both the parties are directly involved, that kind of communication is known as direct communication. In this case, the greatest effect is achieved through oral speech, combining both the parts like verbal and non-verbal. Verbal we have taught you completely, like use of words, and non-verbals like use of your body language or para language or space languages. So direct communication is all about this. In the same way, we can differentiate or we can explain the indirect communication when the communication is merely or mainly one-sided. Okay, so that kind of a communication is known as indirect communication when there is a sender or a receiver, but he is receiving the information, but he cannot, due to some or other reasons, he cannot reply immediate back to the second party, and the second party cannot be anything, can be anything. It's not necessary that he should be a human being. Okay, communication can be done with anyone. If you are reading the newspaper, this is also a kind of a communication also. The reason is the newspaper is giving you some kind of information and you are grabbing that. That is also a kind of a communication. So in case of indirect communication, this is mainly one-sided communication where you receive the information but you cannot immediately reply due to some or other reasons, and maybe the possibility is there that the reason is the second party is not actually the human being. So in indirect communication, which is mainly one-sided, information sources are works of literature, like we study the literature, we study our books, we write our books, or art, the radio messages, the television programs, the newspaper, the magazine publication. These all things communicate to you something. These all communicate to you something, but you are not supposed to, due to some or other reason, reply back to them, because you cannot reply back to them. Okay, because there is none kind of a direct meeting or communication possible. So I hope you would have understood about direct and indirect right now. Next, we move further to the next form. This is mediated and direct form. This is also a kind of form. What is this? Where there is a kind of mediation or the mediator party involved in the communication between sender and the receiver. Okay, so this is like mediated and a direct form of communication are distinguished by presence or absence of an intermediate link acting as an intermediary between parties, and he always acts as a technical tool. There are two parties, the first one is sender and the second one is the receiver. Sometimes it's not possible for them to directly talk to each other or communicate each other. They have to use an intermediary known as a technical tool in the case of communication, and that technical tool is known as the mediated person or intermediary. Okay, so the kind of communication where there is the presence of a technical tool or intermediary, that kind of communication is known as mediated communication. So this is also one form of a communication which usually happens. We are all talking about the intercultural systems. The only reasons to understand these things, otherwise these are very easy to understand these things. The only reason is that there must be maybe there is the extreme possibility that the direct communication is not possible between the parties. So this is why the mediation is used in case of these communications. So last, it has just been said that as an intermediary, a person can act as a technical tool, and this specific term has been used in context of communication subject. Then I have given you information regarding direct, after that indirect, then mediated and direct forms, then inter-ethnic communication. Okay, ethnic, when the people belonging to different ethnicity, okay, different race, when they talk to each other, when they establish any kind of a communication, that kind of a communication is inter-ethnic communication. So inter-ethnic communication is a communication between people representing different peoples, like ethnic groups. Most often society consists of different ethnic. We all have different ethnicity. I am different, you are different. I have number of students. I have taught a number of students having different ethnicities. Okay, maybe this is the reason why we have the knowledge of a number of ethnicities living in the India. So inter-ethnic communication is simply the communication between different ethnicity involved in a society. So most often society consists of a different ethnic group that create and share their subcultures. So it was all about that, very easy to understand and go through. So what your aim should be, it should only be to make the best and possible kind of a differentiation between the communication topics I'm teaching you in this specific lecture. So we have talked about direct, indirect, mediated, inter-ethnic, and the next one, this is also the extension of that, and this is counter-cultural communication. So what is this? Counter-cultural communication occurs between a representative of mother culture and subculture, and is expressed in the disagreement of later with the values and ideals of the mother. Okay, so what happens? There are generation to generation gaps. Okay, so this is generation 1, then here comes the generation 2, there comes the generation 3, and so on. And each generation, every third, it has been proved by researches as well that there have always been differences between the first and third generation. Every third generation is always in a disagreement with whatever the mother culture or the subcultures they have adopted. Okay, so the kind of communication between that culture, between generation first and second, or first or third, or second or third, that kind of a communication is known as countercultural communication, where there is always a kind of a disagreement, and ideals of mothers are considered to be supreme, like generation 1 is considered to be supreme. So in although the last generation is always at the pace of a disagreement, but they have to understand and they have to know the ideals of whatever the generation first cultural was. So this is just a communication, next communication type, which tells you that it occurs between a representative of mother culture and subculture, and subculture is always the part of this broad generation culture. So it was all about that, when they are communicating with each other, then this kind of a communication shall be considered to be countercultural communication. And in this kind of communication, there is always a dissentiment or a disagreement between both the parties to the communication. So that was information regarding this cross countercultural communication. So if we are talking about again all the things, if we are making the conclusion so that we can move further as well, one by one I am telling you all the things, like direct communication, where the parties can meet directly and the communication can be done in any way, like verbal or non-verbal means. After that, there is indirect communication, when there is the communication is only one-sided and you cannot reply back due to some or other reasons. then mediated when there is the involvement of any kind of intermediary between parties, or as he act as an intermediary or as a technical tool. Then inter-ethnic, where more than two ethnicities are involved in the communication, that kind of a communication is known as inter-ethnic communication. Then counterculture, when there is a disagreement between culture and its subculture, and the upper culture or the generation one culture is considered to be the mother culture. Now we have to understand something relating to social classes and groups as well. Okay, that is very easy to understand. Social classes means there are classes on the basis of different status in the society, and groups as well. Okay, like on the basis of origin, on the basis of your race, on the basis of your religion, on the basis of your education, on the basis of profession, social status, or anything. There are the prevalence of social classes everywhere, not in a specific country but around the world. So they are known social classes and social groups as well. So communication between this is known as a social communication or social classes kind of communication. So communication among social classes and group is based on differences between social groups and classes of a particular society. Okay, so this particular communication is based on, or the social communication is based on the different classes and groups prevalent in the society. There is not a single socially homogeneous society in the world. There are a number of societies. All differences between people arise as a result of their origin, as the result of their education, their profession, their social status, etc. So these are the things, and the communication between these classes on the basis of their groups or society, social status, that kind of communication is known as a social communication. So because this involves the different classes and groups of the society. I think one or two things are left only. After that, it will be over. That were very easy and to understand. So this is some details regarding representatives of different demographic groups. Okay. So how does all kind of intercommunication and intercultural or cross-cultural communication is happening? This is happening widely due to representatives of different demographic groups. Okay, because they people made it possible, the cross cultural communication. And now we have to understand about their some of their names and something about them. After that, this topic shall be over. So communication between a representative of different demographic groups, like first of all, they were a religious person, like for example between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland. Then succeeds, this is between men and women, representative of different generations. They people first of all made it possible the intercultural and cross-cultural communication, and this is how the communication around the world emerged. So this is how it emerged. Communication between people in this case is determined by their belonging to a particular group, because they have to make their culture supreme everywhere. So they always try to marketize these kind of things. So they people made, first of all, they people made. Why we are reading this specific slide? The only reason is that in case of intercultural and cross-cultural communication from the ancient time, it was not possible to make the communication between different ethnicities. Only these people, the representative of different demographic groups, made it possible. So this is why we have included it in this specific slide. If the question is asked, that can be on the basis of reasoning and assertion type and these kind of things. Then I think this is the second last one. This is a regional communication. Regional communication, simply this is the communication on a regional basis. Like I'm talking to you, if I'm talking to my family members or the people around my region, then my communication level or my communication skill or my presentation will be different But when I am talking to you, you are sitting at your home somewhere in the state of Kerala or Tamil Nadu or somewhere else, then my talking skills or my communication skills shall be different. So this is known as the communication on the basis of region, and this is widely known as regional communication. Okay, so regional communication occurs between a resident of different areas whose behavior in the same situation can vary significantly. My behavior can be different. If I'm talking to you right now, it can be different on the basis. If I'm talking to via phone call, first of all, I'll ask where are you from, then on the basis of whatever the region you belongs to, I shall be taking some ideas in my mind how I have to interact you. So this is kind of a regional communication you have to understand. Then there is business sphere. There is a more kind of communication type. This is business sphere communication. When you talk about your family members, then your style of talking or style of communicating is widely different, because it involves the grapevine or informal kind of communication. But when you talk to your colleagues, when you talk to your partners, competitors, when you talk about business spheres, then your level of communication, your ideas, your presentation is completely different. And this makes the business sphere communication to the picture. So communication is business sphere is related to professional activities. Okay, so communication is business sphere promotes the establishment of cooperation and partnership relations between colleagues, subordinates, manager, partners, and competitors. You can imagine when you are talking to these persons, then your communication level, skills, or style will be widely different. And when you are talking to your family members or your friends, it will be completely different. So this slide teaches you regarding business sphere communication only. So I hope you would have got the idea right now. I think this is the last slide now. This is mass communication. Mass communication is simply a communication where there is one party involved in communicating to masses of people, and that one party is not can not possibly or only be the human being. It can be anything. Okay, if this is spreading the mass information and knowledge, then that kind of a communication spread will be considered to be the mass communication. So that was the detail regarding this mass communication, the process of disseminating information, knowledge, spiritual values, moral, legal norms, or anything by means of technical means, or anything like press, radio, television, or a human being which is a speaker. Nowadays there is an era of motivational speakers nowadays. I get a lot of links on my cell phones of links through different social media platforms for motivational speakers who are standing somewhere delivering some kind of lectures and just promoting themselves. So this is also a kind of mass communication, and this is done to numerically large and dispersed audiences. So it was all about that. So if we are just making the crux and conclusion of what we have understood in this specific lecture, we talked about what is cross-cultural communication. That is the communication between different cultural and ethnicities. Then we learned about a direct communication where only two parties are directly involved, then indirect where there is merely one party. And after that, we studied about mediated form where there is intermediary prevalent for mediating between the communication. Then there is inter-ethnic communication where more than two ethnicities are involved. Then there was the prevalence of counter-cultural communication where there is the generation gap and the intercultural or subcultural disagreement is there. After that, social classes and group we studied about the representative of different groups, and then a regional communication. After that, I taught you regarding business sphere communication, what does happen in business sphere communication, and finally we did about mass communication. So in this way, I must tell you that we have already completed by now. I didn't know at the time of making up the schedule for that, but we have got the day of tomorrow as well, that we can utilize to some other things as well, like we can take 2 or 3 lectures for paper 2 as well. So in this video lecture, that is much more than sufficient, I think, and it has already covered the topic for paper 1 for tomorrow as well. After this lecture, after 10 or 15 minutes, I shall be telling you the time, and the paper second lecture shall be taken. And if this is not over, then we shall be taking another lecture as well. So tomorrow there shall not be the lecture of paper 1, there shall be lecture for only paper 2, and that may be 1 or 2 or 3 lectures as the case may be. So I must tell you that in today morning I delivered I think 7 lectures to each and every one that were for Tuesday. You all have to go through. If we are working hard for you, then you are also supposed to do that. Only then you can expect to qualify. By merely going through the syllabus is not sufficient. Okay, because you have to go through individual topics, and individual topics are very important to go through. So if you are not going to, because only 1 or 2 words shall be written in the syllabus and nothing else. And if you see only that word, if you shall simply Google it, it shall tell you their names and their meanings in 5 or 6 lines only. Going through 5 or 6 lines shall not be sufficient. This is the reason why we are trying to include as maximum data as possible, which is relevant directly or indirectly from the exam point of view. So whatever the hard work we are doing, we also expect the same from you. On a regular basis, I take the opinion and the study status of everyone, and I expect you all be regular. So thank you so much for joining me in this lecture. And for regarding next lecture, we shall be intimated you as soon as possible. Thank you so much. This is Gurpal Singh from Gurpal Education.